So look here at Boxplots. That's just another way to display data. Another way that we might have heard of these, box and whisker plots. So to get the ball rolling, what you're going to need to create a box plot is a 5-number summary. What that is the minimum value of the data, the first quartile, or the median of the lower half, the median, which is right in the middle of the data, which we could call the second quartile, the third quartile, the median of the upper half, and the maximum value. So what that looks like, let's say we have this data on the beginning pulse of students in a class of 23. So the minimum 50 and the max 110. Those are pretty easy to spot. And then moving forward, now when we start thinking about median, again, what we can do, right, start crossing them off, so on and so forth, all the way down, and what we'd end up with is 79 is right in the middle. Now, to figure out the quartile 1, you're going to start just outside of the median. And like, so if we start underlining 76, and then we start kind of crossing them off as we go, right, we end up with the first quartile is 66. Same way with the second quartile. We kind of cross these off as we go. So we end up with a third quartile of 87. So what we can do with that, let's say that we have more data here, and you can put this into your calculator, remember, and another way to do this, so put this into list 1, and if you do 1-bar stats, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll get the 5-number summary right away. So once we have that 5-number summary, we can go create our box plot. And then we're able to find something what's called the IQR interquartile range, which is just the range from Q1 to Q3. And then at times we can also figure out if there are outliers that exist with the box plot. So very quickly, to create your box plot, you put your minimum value at one end of the whisker. The box, for your box whisker plot, go to either side of the quartiles. The median's right in the middle, so there'll be a line in your box somewhere, and then the maximum value will be the end of your whisker. So your box goes from the quartiles. So this would be your IQR, if you wanted to calculate that. So what happens with a box plot, if you think about it, we're breaking the data down into quarters. Let me throw my key in there. So we're breaking it down into quarters. So 25% of the data is here, 25% of the data is there, and then 25% will be in each whisker. So even if you have a really stretched out whisker, let's say your box plot looks something like this, or maybe you had a really stretched out whisker, this is still only 25% of the data in each section. But a bigger whisker or a smaller whisker or a bigger box, smaller box, this just gives a good sense of how spread out the data is. So what if there is an outlier? Well, here's what's called the 1.5 IQR rule. And so what you do is the first thing you need to do is find the IQR. So you do Q3 minus Q1. And then when we multiply the IQR by 1.5, something is an outlier, algebraically speaking, if it lies above Q3, 1.5 IQR is above Q3 or 1.5 below Q1. So let's go back that end of class data that we just saw back here. If you'll allow me to slide back. All right, so taking this data. So if we do, I can do it right here on the sheet so you can kind of see where it's coming from. So 77.5 minus 64.5 equals 13. And so I'll take 1.5 times IQR, and that equals 1.5 times 13, which for us is 19.5. And so the lower bound will take 64.5 Q1, we'll subtract 19.5. Well, that's 45. The upper bound, take Q3, 77.5, and add 19.5. And that equals 97. So here the lowest value is 54, so there are no outliers below, but we do have one outlier above, so 109 is an outlier. So now that we actually have this ability to do some calculation, we can go beyond just it appears there's an outlier, there might or might not be an outlier, to actually saying yes, there is an outlier. So flip back through all this. Again, so with Boxplots, we can show outliers using dots. So you notice min and max are still there, but let's say that they are outliers. What we can do is just stop our whiskers at the largest observation or the smallest observation that's not an outlier. So again, what this is called is a modified boxplot. A modified boxplot allows it to see where there are outliers. Right? So the whiskers will end at the largest or smallest non-outlier value. So this is a piece of data. So you pull something from the data set, and the min and max won't change. So let's say this data set, what would have happened? Just a quick kind of general sense. Right? We had a big whisker here. Right, if this was 109 all the way up to 54. So since we figured out that 109 was an outlier, what we could have done, if we wanted to make this modified, is we would have cut our box off at 87. Again, we need a scale to be, but this is just kind of a rough idea of what's happening. And then you'd have your outlier up here at 109 with some kind of dot or star, or some kind of indication that it is an outlier. So from here, sometimes they just give you a 5-number summary. And again, we can create our box plot because we have enough information here. And so what this quick example is going to do is do a side-by-side or back-to-back box plots. And here you can see that they've done a modified box plot because there's an outlier. Or we could do a regular box plot, just have a bigger whisker. It's kind of dependent upon what the question asks or what you're interested in. But this is what will be called a side-by-side box plot or back-to-back box plot. And it allows us to kind of compare these different levels of caffeine and how much it affects memory, right? Number of items recalled correctly depending upon what level of caffeine you're in. So now someone can say, well, high caffeine had a larger range. It looks like the medians for low and none are the same. It looks like none had the smallest range. So the larger range for high, smallest range for low. We can start to compare and say all of a sudden, well, it looks like, here's the maximum value for high. Well, that falls in the same spot as Q3. So we can say, the maximum amount of number of items recalled is equal to the third quartile for low and none. So it's at this point that you just kind of pick through stocks, compare and contrast, and if you see anything that really stands out to you, right? High has an outlier, right? There's an outlier there we saw in the modified. Versus, low and none have no outliers, and just kind of keep picking your way through stocks.